Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Zach.
and welcome to The Movie Vault. Today we are reviewing the 2020 movie directed by Christopher Nolan, Tenet.
Backwards is movie this.
And that is kind of a start of the adventure that we're about to go on. But first, we have some news to share with everyone.
Yes, we are restructuring our movie review podcasts. There will no longer be a 20-minute long plot summary because we realize that most of our viewers have recently watched the movie and they don't want to experience it again.
Yes, and even if they haven't, it'd be better for them to just watch the movie than to hear us summarize the movie. So we'll still have spoiler-full episodes in general, although this one will have a tiny little exception. But we're going to have a lot of different things that we're doing versus just summarizing the plot, because it's not very hard.
Yep. And another great thing is we are back in our studio today.
Yes, David finally isn't out of town this weekend. He's back with us, and it's pretty exciting. And next week, he is going to be on the show as punishment for not being here the last 2 weeks.
Yep. We are
So
punishing
whatever
David.
movie we do, David will have to suffer through with us.
Please send in some punishments for us to do to him on the podcast.
Although he had to review the B movie, so that kind of already was. Although it turned out okay, I guess.
It turned out great. I love that one. That one's probably my favorite.
Zach's favorite. Oh,
The one that I'm not in.
Yeah, I guess Zach doesn't like listening to
You
himself.
guys can tell I self-loathe myself.
All right, so what is our first of the new sections?
So the first segment that we will have is called Watch or Botch.
And this is mostly for movies that have been reviewed in the theater. So this one we went to the theater to watch. And we're just going to tell you whether we think you should watch it or whether you shouldn't, so botch. And
It's just basically a non-spoiler section before
Yeah.
we completely spoil the movie.
all right, so Zach, watch or botch?
If I had to choose between watch or botch, I would choose watch. Definitely.
I would also choose watch on this movie, even if it is a little bit long.
It's definitely a long movie. It's very confusing. There's a lot of information to process, and by the time that you process it, it's already 3 scenes later, and you didn't realize what happens in those scenes. So it's definitely hard to grasp, but it's definitely a watch, and it's probably gonna have to be a watch times 2 or times 3 to completely understand.
Yeah, actually, this movie is, like Zach said, it's definitely one that it would help to watch it several times and in rearranged orders to try to understand it. But that's all we'll give you in the spoiler-free section. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go out to theaters if the standards in your area have allowed for that, and go watch it yourself.
Yes. The next section that we are gonna have is called the quote of the movie.
So this week's quote of the movie is a quote that was early on in the movie. The protagonist, who's the main character, meets this other character who's explaining to him some of the oddities that are going on in the world. And she says, "Don't try to understand it, feel it." And that is a really good summary of this movie.
Yeah.
Don't try to understand it, at least in the first watch. Don't, because you'll just kind of lose your mind in the whole thing.
You just gotta feel it. You gotta feel it for the emotions the first time. If you try to understand it, you're not gonna have a good time because you're gonna fail.
And it's kind of funny that we're having a good time again because Robert Pattinson is in this movie.
Yes, sir.
But we'll get to that later.
Okay, so let's get right into the plot. We're gonna do about 5 minutes of the plot instead of the 20-minute sections that we've done before. So, how does this movie start out, Benjamin?
Well, we start out with an orchestra. There's a terrorist attack. After the terrorist attack, the guy we find out is the protagonist, gets captured, takes a suicide pill. The suicide pill is fake. He gets resurrected, but not really because he wasn't dead in the first place.
Finds out that it was a test, and he really was just a noble guy because he didn't give in to the temptation of selling out his friends while he was being tortured. And he comes back. He was told that to use the word tenet in different situations to open doors that he wants and open doors that he doesn't want. And then, so he goes to this scientist lady, and she teaches him how the physics of tenet works. And basically, there are these things called inverted objects where you can the entropy in those objects work backwards. So when you basically, its movement is backwards. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and that's the part where she says, "Feel it, don't try to understand it." After that, he's trying to prevent this World War III thing, so he has to go to Dubai to talk to this weapons arms dealer.
And that's when he meets his buddy Neil that later explains.
And Neil is played by the one and only Robert Pattinson. Oh, and I didn't mention that the protagonist is played by Denzel Washington's son, John David Washington.
Also, this is just a clarification. Ben and I are both Team Edward when it comes to the Twilight movies.
Yes, even though I haven't seen the Twilight movies, I am Team Edward.
I haven't seen it either, but I'm also Team Edward. That's just because of how amazing Robert Pattinson is in Good Time and in this movie. So, yeah. Anyway, so he meets Neil, and they break into the Indian arms dealer's couple's house, and he talks to the man, finds out that the woman is actually in charge of the arms deals, and they find out that a Russian art dealer can communicate with the future, and he's the one that they actually should be looking for.
Right. And then he tries to find the Russian guy by flirting with this lady, but then that doesn't go very well because the lady is the Russian guy's wife, and he brings in his thugs to beat him up, but then he beats up the thugs and goes away because he's cool and he's strong. And following that, which there was a meeting with Michael Caine before that, but that's beside the point. It's just we had to get that Michael Caine in there.
Yeah.
Then they have to figure out how to get this painting out of the airport because the painting is what's holding the wife to the husband. So the Russian guy is named Sato, right? Mm-hmm. He doesn't want his wife to leave, so he has this painting that is fake or something like that.
Yeah.
Can you explain that more?
It's more of a blackmail thing for her. So, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it's just blackmail. They have to go try to steal it. While they're going to try to steal it, they have a few hiccups in their plan. They fight these people. They almost get suffocated in a vault, and their friends who they have set up crash an airplane into an airport, and then they get away, but they don't get away with their target thing because they find out later that Sato still has the painting, and so that was all for naught, basically.
And while they were fighting in the airport, they fought two different people. One of them was fighting in forward time. The other one was fighting in reverse time. Then the main character goes to Mumbai to talk to the Indian lady again about what was happening. And she told him that the reverse guy and the forward guy were both the same guy, just fighting at two different times. And it kind of was like one of the first twists. That was pretty cool. And then he pretends to have an affair with the Russian guy's wife. He gets close with the Russian guy because of this, because the Russian guy Sato wants to kill him. And they go parasailing or something like that.
They go parasailing. The wife tries to kill the husband, Sato, and then in a shocking turn of events, the protagonist goes out and saves him, which you're like, why does he do that? It's because he wants to make a deal with Sato. Sato is an arms dealer, and he knows that he has access to these nuclear weapons, I believe, and he wants to deal plutonium to him. It's a trick so he can figure out what's going on. But the ending is he ends up snooping around and he gets in trouble, but the deal is still on, and so then they go to make the deal.
Yep, they go to make the deal, and it is actually pretty weird. So he goes in forward time. So let's just say that the deal doesn't go that well. The wife gets shot, Kat gets shot, and in reverse time. And then it's a really cool scene because it's through this window, and one side has forward time, the other side has reverse time, and it all happens at once. So you get to see the same scene happen twice from two different perspectives. And then it's about halfway through the movie at this point, and the protagonist goes through the portal or whatever to go into reverse time at this time. And from this point on, he's experiencing the movie backwards, all the way back to the beginning.
So we saw a crashing car earlier in one of the chase scenes. Turns out he was driving that car that crashed. Mm-hmm. And then they eventually get back to the airport after they have saved Kat. So Kat was dead, and then they went back in reverse time, saved her, but they had to go back. I forget why they had to go back to the airport. They had to go back to the airport, and that's where we find out that the protagonist character was the one who was fighting him earlier in the movie in forward time, and he was both people. Yeah. And what had happened is that Neil saw him take off the mask and realized what was going on. Because Neil was the one who was always more informed about the technology throughout the movie.
But the protagonist didn't know to the extent of what Neil knew. So basically, they go on this long time traveling back through all of the different things that happened at the beginning of the movie. And the wife Kat eventually confronts Sato. And Sato's plan was that he actually had pancreatic cancer and that he was going to take the world with him by creating the start of the apocalypse and the end of the apocalypse at the same time, from his perspective, by doing it in 2 different times, from reverse time and forward time. And so they have to create a bunch of different teams to go forward and backward in time at this big climactic battle, blah, blah, blah. And it's pretty confusing, like super confusing.
Yeah, there's basically a bunch of troops like in Hobbs and Shaw. Like imagine the end of Hobbs and Shaw, but with some of the troops going in reverse time and some of them going in normal time.
Yeah, it's like Hobbs and Shaw, but more confusing.
Yeah, that's this entire movie basically. And no Dwayne Johnson, sadly.
Yeah.
He probably could have made the movie.
It's okay. Robert Pattinson makes up for it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But, and then the ending of the movie, we see, so there was a part of the movie where Kat had said that her husband, she saw him dive off the ship and disappear, their yacht in Vietnam, and with another lady. Well, it turns out that she was that lady, and she shot him, but she almost shot him too early because they needed to get the bomb deactivated before Kato died, because that was going to activate the algorithm somehow. But fortunately, they drug it out. They drug one of the things out. I think it was one of the particles that controlled the algorithm. Mm-hmm. It's not the bomb. So the bomb went off, but they got the thing out, so it didn't trigger the apocalypse. And then we get this scene with Neil and the protagonist at the end, where they talk about how their friendship is just beginning for the protagonist, but it's ending for Neil.
So they experience their friendship backwards to each other.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, speaking of watch or botch, we really botched that explanation.
But the reason that we botched it is because this movie is so confusing.
Not only that, there's just a lot going on that we can't explain, and we don't really want to explain.
We can't really explain it in the 5 minutes that we probably went a little bit over. But we're doing our best, and you're right. We don't really want to explain it because you got to go figure it out for yourself. You know, that's what Christopher Nolan wants.
Yeah, exactly. So the next part that we're going to do is something probably just for this movie. But what would you rate this movie on the confusion scale? Out of 10.
Out of 10. I'm going to give this one an 8. I'm trying to think. I guess, what is the most confusing movie you've ever watched? I mean, this has to be
There
out
are more
there.
confusing movies that don't make sense, though. This one's logically consistent.
A movie that doesn't make sense would be Eraserhead.
Yeah.
Like, that movie makes 0 sense. But it's not also... this one's supposed to be trying to be logically consistent. Eraserhead isn't, because it's more, like, out there and like, that's not the point of it. Mm-hmm. But this movie is like, you're supposed to be able to figure it out. But in one sitting, it's really hard to figure out. So that's why I give it an 8.
It's like an escape room where they only give you like half the time that you're allotted usually.
Yeah. That's a good way to describe it. Yeah. I think it's up there with Inception. I think we're going to talk about that later.
I feel like this is more confusing. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, anyway, I might agree with you on that one.
I would also give it an 8 just because it was super confusing.
Yeah, and it's late when we're watching it, and you have to use your mind, you know?
Yeah, that's not something that we need to do after high school.
Well, I'm trying to take notes, you know?
Yeah. I really botched my notes, too. I really botched
It's because you figure out everything like 30 minutes after they set it up, so that's why.
Yeah. All right, the next section we're going to do is called Favorite Moments. In case you don't know what that means, we're going to talk about our favorite moments.
Okay, my favorite moment of the movie was the fight scene between the protagonist and and Kato's thugs, because it really set up the protagonist's character, because he let the thugs. So Sato was assuming that he was having an affair with his wife, which wasn't true, and although he clearly did care for her by the end of the movie, but he kind of let the thugs get to him a little bit at first, and then he completely went off, and it was epic. It was in a kitchen, which kitchen fight scenes are just cool for some reason. There was he was putting the guy's head down the line and just shoving it all the way down. I don't know. I just thought that it was a very well done fight scene and in a tight spot. So that's what I liked.
Yeah, I think my favorite part had to have been that scene where they're breaking into the to the art vault and movie vault, art vault. And anyway, they're breaking into it, and they're fighting. Two people are fighting. One of them is the protagonist. The other one is the protagonist, but he doesn't know it's the protagonist. He doesn't know it's himself, and they're fighting each other. One of them's in forward time, and the other one's in backwards time. And the physics of their fight was just so weird and cool at the same time. And if you think, the more you think about it, the more consistent it seems. But it seems really outlandish when you're watching it. But it's really cool, actually.
One of the coolest things about this movie is that everything that you see that you're like, that seems kind of out of place, they always revisit it every single time. Mm-hmm. That, like, there were several moments where I was just like, my jaw just kind of dropped because I realized what they had done. There's one scene at the end of the movie where they're running into this tunnel and this Hummer is honking its horn. And you're like, why are they doing that? And then you realize that was Neil in the past. Or like in the future, I think he was I don't know, somewhere in the time warped, and he was trying to warn them, but he didn't do it in time. So stuff like that in this movie was very cool.
Yeah, it was. I'd say the choreography, which we'll get to, but the choreography and the fight scenes and just the physics of the movie, the action, everything was just really good. Very, very, very good.
All right. Is that it with favorite moments?
I guess favorite moments. So let's get into... So the Movie Vault has actually been picking up a little pep in its step lately. So we're actually introducing a new sponsor that we have.
Yes. This episode of the Movie Vault is brought to you by Hedman Anglin Insurance Agency. Hedman Anglin Insurance Agency has been saving people an average of $500 a year on car and home insurance. Call Hedman Anglin Insurance Agency today at 614-486-7300. That's 614-486-7300. If you do call them, make sure you tell them that Ben and Zach sent you. With all the destruction in this movie, I think there was definitely some people in this movie who needed insurance.
Yes, if your brain needs some healing from this movie, or you got physically hurt watching this movie, please contact them.
Now we will get into our next part of the Movie Vault, which is...
The Outsider Review.
All right, so our Outsider Review is brought to you today by AV Club, who does not sponsor us, but they're a website, and I think they talk about movies. So, this is a review that has been written by A.A. Dowd. Any critic who has... We talked about A.O. Scott the first episode.
Oh, I hate
But
A.O.
if you
Scott.
start your name, and your name is like two letters that don't normally get used together.
A-O.
Like A-O-A-A.
A-A.
Like if your name's CJ or JJ or something normal. But like you're just so pretentious already. Like I don't even want to read your article. But
like EJ from that High School Musical, the series.
The title of this is Christopher Nolan's sleek time travel thriller Tenet is more confusing than exciting. So AA goes on to write about how confusing this movie is. How Christopher Nolan likes gadgets and things that look like they're in Lincoln commercials. That's what I say. I think that Christopher Nolan is like obsessed with like anything that you would imagine is in a luxury car commercial. So like Lincoln or Lexus or something like that.
He had a BMW as a getaway car in this movie.
Yeah, that's true. I think that annoyed him. He has a nameless hero who's punching his way through the Twilight Zone, and like But even the worst part about this is this guy gives this terrible review that he says it's not very good, or I don't even know whether it's a terrible review, but he doesn't give a number score. Like, it's like he wants to punch it, but he's not willing to land the final blow, you know?
Yeah.
You gotta leave that number review. I don't care about
He doesn't want to upset either side. But you upset us by not upsetting either side.
So basically, our outside reviewer
is an idiot.
He didn't do a good job, you know? A.A. Dowd, step up your game.
All right, the next section is going to be ratings. We have a 10-point rating system now.
Oh.
Who offered our 10th point, Ben? Tell us.
Ike, one of our listeners,
like Mike and Ike,
texted me on our Instagram at the Movie Vault Pod, and he said that we should add a 10th category that was action/choreography, and I said, that is a really good idea. So
especially since we needed a 10th point.
And because this is the perfect movie for this to be introduced in. And also, thank you, Ike, for sending that in.
Thank you, Mike and Ike.
We are definitely using that. All right.
First one, sentiment.
All right, so why don't you go first?
I gave it an 8.
I gave it a 7.
Okay, that's close.
I almost gave it an 8, but I gave it a 7.
I gave it an 8 because it's Christopher Nolan, obviously, so it has a name to the brand. But I really liked this movie, actually. I'm really into time travel movies and hitman rom-coms and comedies in general, but this movie really hit the spot with time travel.
Yes. And I gave it a 7. I think I mentioned that because I thought it was just it was good, but I thought compared to other Christopher Nolan movies that I like, I didn't feel like it was going to be up to that higher standard.
But was it?
I don't think it was though.
Okay, we'll talk about that
We'll
in that
talk
section.
about that later.
Anyway, message is the second point.
I give this a 6 because I'm really confused what the message of this
Same
movie
here.
is.
I don't know what they were trying to do. Obviously, they're trying to confuse us.
What'd you get it?
6 also.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'm docking points because there's like this thing with the protagonist and Kat where she's like, it seems like one of the underlying points is that he cares about her and he's like putting the interest of her and her safety above the mission. Mm-hmm. But it's not super clear, and it does seem like this movie is a lot more stylistic than it is about like message.
Yeah, and I know that's what they were going for anyway.
Yeah.
But all right, plot is the third point. I gave it an 8.
I gave it a 7.
Okay, so you're just like.
But maybe
by.
I kind of agree with A.A. Dowd because it was a little confusing and maybe a little bit long.
I like stuffy plots if they're very consistent, and I think this movie was kind of consistent.
I think this movie
there might be a
was
few
consistent.
plot holes here and there, but that's going to happen when in time travel movies, in anything. So any time travel, but I do think that for most part of the movie, it was pretty consistent.
Yeah, that is true. It was very impressive how consistent this movie is, and I think I just gave it a 7, and it's kind of similar to Zach's 8, so I don't think there's much disagreement here, really.
Dang it.
Cinematography.
7.
I gave it a 9.
Ooh.
I think I rate cinematography too high, though, because, like, I was just kept looking at, like, the shots that were going on, and I was like, wow, this is so good. I like this.
Ben's eyes are easier to please than mine.
Yeah, but I also gave Good Time and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Baby Driver. No, maybe I didn't give Baby Driver
You
as good.
you didn't give Nacho Libre a high cinematography score, and I did.
Yeah, so
You gave it like a 4, and I think I gave it like a 7.
that's true. I need to look at the consistency of my cinematography scores, but I do genuinely think that this was a very well shot.
I do
movie.
too.
But
Most
it
of the
wasn't.
shots.
It wasn't perfectly shot, but it was very well shot. So it's not a 10. But
Yeah. All right. Character arcs is our next one. What did you give that?
I gave it a 7 because I think the protagonist character arc is good. Is very good because he's the protagonist, you know. And Neil's character arc, I mean, what'd you think about it? Like,
It was good, kind of.
it was kind of good, but it wasn't
It was
thorough.
backwards. That's what it was.
It was backwards, and I felt like that kind of diminished some of it.
A little bit, but that's not what they meant to do. So therefore, it's not. We can't judge it based on not what it's meant to do. I also gave it a 7, so I agree
okay.
with you. But
I think Kat had a good character arc.
yeah, she did because of her son and finally dealing with the problem in her life that she was in the beginning of the movie. She was so like set on like you can't fight it. It's all you just gotta let it happen. You gotta just lie down. She said you can't fight it. You just have to beg or something like that.
Yeah, and Sato's character arc was interesting, but I thought it might have been slightly far-fetched with the whole thing about him being a young teen and discovering the thing. But then I guess the movie wouldn't work if they didn't set that up, so that was kind of necessary.
Anyway, yeah. Okay, next is originality. What did you give it?
I give it an 8.
Same. Wow, we're very consistent with each other.
Yeah, this is maybe the closest scores that we're ever going to get.
We don't know that yet.
We don't know that yet, though. Originality, what'd you think?
I gave it an 8 because I think that it is unlike any other time travel movie that I've seen. Normally in time travel movies, you're like you're set in a time and you go backwards in a time. But I haven't really seen a time travel movie where you're like in the same place but experiencing time differently.
I think this movie is one of the more realistic, as much as you can have a realistic time travel movie, because obviously, as far as we know, time travel is impossible. But a lot of time travel movies think of it more in a sense that would never work. But this movie, at least Christopher Nolan tries really hard to make this logically plausible.
Talking about entropy and it's just energy reversed.
And we know Nolan likes to do this. I personally have not seen Interstellar, but I think he did this in that movie where he like talked to scientists and stuff and tried to make it make sense. And he probably did that in this movie
As
too.
logically consistent as he can in a
Yes.
movie.
So as an idea, I think Christopher Nolan nailed this one.
Yeah. Okay. The next one, number 7, is acting. What did you give it?
I gave it an 8. I mean, Robert Pattinson bumps the
Yeah.
score up automatically.
I thought I gave it a 7, so one
Okay.
higher. But I think the protagonist was okay. He was okay. I thought Robert Pattinson was good, and I think the villain for me, Sato, I think he was the best in this movie for my
Who is
opinion.
he played by? So the protagonist is played by John David Washington, as we mentioned, and then Robert Pattinson plays Neil. Elizabeth Debicki plays Kat, who's Sato's wife.
It's Sador.
Sador. Man, we've been pronouncing it wrong the whole time. I think they kind of pronounced it like that in the movie, though.
Yeah, they're British. Sador.
So who plays Sador then? Oh, Kenneth Branagh. Oh, I know that guy. What else was he?
Oh, he directed Thor.
Really?
Yeah, the first Thor, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think you might be right about that.
And I know he was the voice that says "Mayday, Mayday" at the beginning of Infinity War.
He's also in Wild Wild West,
Is-
The Road to El Dorado.
Is he the one that directed Thor? You see that? Hold on.
We have to go to his filmography for that.
But yeah, I mean, if it's the guy that I'm talking about, I really like him because he did the voiceover and he directed it, I think. If not, we'll cut this part out.
Directed films. Thor.
Yes, he directed
did.
Thor. Yep.
And
That's
I
right.
actually kind of like Thor, even though it's not the best Marvel movie.
Not
but
the greatest.
I still like it.
Still good.
It's the first one I ever watched, so maybe that's why I like it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was also in Dunkirk, so I guess Christopher Nolan likes bringing people back.
Yeah, for sure. But
And
anyway,
so I personally actually liked John David Washington quite a bit. I thought he was like serious, but he had some funny lines. He's charismatic. Definitely can see him being a lead man in plenty of other movies. Robert Pattinson, I like. Actually, all jokes aside, I actually think that Robert Pattinson wasn't quite as good in this movie, but I think it was because
he had everything experienced backwards.
and he didn't have the starring role, you know? Like, in Good Time, Robert Pattinson, it was basically Robert Pattinson's movie.
That's true.
So,
that's
like,
true.
he could really show the breadth of his abilities. But in this movie, he wasn't given that. But I think he did a really good job for what he was supposed to be.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, the next thing that we have is style, number 8. What did you give it?
I gave it a 9.
Wow, I gave it a 7.
Because I like this style. I don't know. I feel like I ripped Inception because I didn't like the style, but then I come back to this movie and I like the style in this movie. I think it works for what it
sure.
is. Because my problem with Inception's style was that it was in a dream, and I felt like people didn't dream like that unless Christopher Nolan dreams like that.
I
But
bet Christopher Nolan seems like the type to have really elaborate setup rules in his dreams.
But he set up this world that was supposed to be the real world that was somewhat futuristic, and I could see it, and I thought that it worked really well, even with his like
Oh, the style was
luxury like aesthetic. What would they call that? Like luxury core.
great. Maybe. I'd like some luxury core, honestly.
Yeah, if we can get a luxury core aesthetic TikTok video, because that's the thing on TikTok. Like they'll do like English teacher aesthetic, or like Spanish teacher aesthetic. You know, rare aesthetics.
Hola,
Anyway.
chicos. Okay, the next thing that we have is number 9, score.
I gave the score an 8.
I gave it a 7.
This was an interesting score, but I thought
So here's something that I noticed that our producer David actually pointed out. So in the beginning of the movie, the score is like, nah, and then at the end of the movie, it went,
oh, I would not have
it
noticed
flipped the score, or like the little, it kind of like,
man, that is so smart.
yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, this score is industrial. It's kind of brutal.
Even the title, Tenet, it's backwards and forwards the same.
Yeah.
Did you think of that before?
No,
or
I did.
Are you serious?
I mean, I've noticed it, but like subconsciously, you know?
Yeah.
You see the way that they write it, and you can kind of see that.
Yeah.
This movie is smarter even than I
Although,
realized.
yeah, so it's just it's very meta in a way.
Yeah, I actually did notice parts that were self-referential, but I'm kind of blanking on. Like, specifically, there was one line that I was like, that is... Well, anytime that the protagonist talks about being the protagonist is so self-referential.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is interesting because I don't know that I particularly remembered Nolan being like that. Like
He wasn't. That's more
that's
of
his reach for Quentin.
that's more of a Dan Harmon thing.
or a Quentin Tarantino thing.
That yes, but he doesn't reference the outside world. He doesn't really break the fourth wall. He references his past movies.
That's true.
So that's more of a Quentin thing. Okay, the tenth rating system, which is new for this week, is action/choreography. What did you give it?
I gave it a 9 because most of the action was very impressive in this movie.
I think this is the highest score I've ever given. I gave it a 9 as well.
Yeah.
So I think that those fight scenes where one of them's in reverse and the other one's in forward, and you get to watch it from one perspective at one part of the movie, and then they come back to that scene later in the movie, and he's really like fighting himself from two different times. And it's like there's one part where he was like crawling away backwards. I was like, what is happening right now? Why is he fighting a guy that's acting like this? Then he later is in that role of the guy crawling away in forward time, so I get to see why he's like crawling away, and it's really cool.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. The way that they did the forward and reverse is just, it was amazing. I can't imagine how hard that was to choreograph.
Yeah, and they set up a world where like there's different rules. So like every time where they'd walk in a scene, and I saw like a bullet hole in the background, I'd be like, okay, duck everyone, like because they're like the bullet's coming out of that wall in a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you also had that warning, so it created a different environment. Because if you saw the bullets in the wall, you knew that there was potential to get shot.
Yeah.
So it presented like a different strategy.
So there was one part in the movie that like did foreshadowing. They were driving in that BMW while they were doing that.
Oh yeah.
And one of the mirrors was cracked, and I was like, okay, is there a bullet in there that's gonna go through and kill someone? Did they plan that? But really, the characters didn't see that. And then it explains later on that the protagonist actually hits the car with his car while his future self hits the car that his past self is driving in and breaks that mirror, and that's why it was broken. But I was thinking, like, why would they do a little shot of that mirror? And you can't really notice it because there's so much going on, and it does a tiny little 1-second shot. So it's really cool to like finally notice those things in later scenes. And it all has to do with like the action and choreography and making sure everything fits. And honestly, you got to watch this movie frontwards and backwards to notice how the fight scenes actually work. So
Yes. And if you have an ability to get a recut version, that would be cool. But we're going to have to move on.
Yeah.
Well, let's say our final scores.
74%.
Mine was 78%.
Okay, I think this was my highest. I think my
let's
last
see.
highest was
Yes, it is your highest because Baby Driver was 71%. So
74.
higher than Baby Driver's, and I think it's also my highest.
This movie deserves my highest score
Which
so far.
Yeah, 78% is 1% higher. So I actually have movies rated 75, 76, 77, and 78.
Wow.
So Good Time is the last, but honestly, all these movies I thought were good. They're like my style of movie. I could put them in any order. Mm-hmm. So I like that. So why don't we move on to
The next thing that we have is any plot holes or anything that we didn't really like about it.
Were there plot holes though? I think if you think about it enough, there probably are.
Yeah. But we didn't. Okay, next section. Things that we liked about the movie.
I liked the aesthetic. I liked the acting.
Oh yeah.
I liked the car chase scenes were cool. Specifically the car chase scene with the fire truck.
That was cool. They used the ladder to go on top of the other truck.
And then they had to shoot the tires off the police car. That was like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
It was, yeah, the things I liked was definitely the action. That has to be the best part of the movie.
Yeah, I think, so you can talk about style or substance. I think this movie is definitely better stylistically.
Okay.
So if you're looking at it from a stylistic perspective versus the story's still good.
Yeah.
But the style really brings.
And there's so much style and so much world building that it really just takes the spotlight off of like character arcs and everything. And that's the intent. So that's why I went along with it.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of comes up to preference whether you like stylistic movies as compared to movies of substance. I tend to drift more towards stylistic movies, so this is
I usually go more towards substance, but this is Christopher Nolan, so it was an exception for me. Okay, the next section we have is did we like Robert Pattinson in this movie or Good Time better?
I liked Good Time better.
I think I did too.
Yes, Robert Pattinson was better in Good Time because
Like you said, he wasn't the main character in this movie. He has to be the main character.
yeah, and because the character of Connie is just such a weird and unique character to play,
Mm-hmm.
and the blonde hair. Like, also, is Robert Pattinson British or does he have a British accent?
I don't know. Is he British in Twilight? I've never seen Twilight, as we said.
Let's see. I'm googling it right now. Robert Pattinson is British. I did not know that. I guess that makes sense because he was in Harry Potter.
British. Hey, we have a listener from Britain, I think, or something like
Yeah,
that.
so shout out listener from the UK.
What if it's Robert Pattinson?
What if Robert Pattinson's listening to our podcast?
Because we talk about
we
him
should
in
have
every
named
episode.
our podcast the Robert Pattinson Vault.
And then he would have listened to it probably.
Yeah,
Actually.
probably.
Yeah. Okay, next thing that we have is, how would you compare this to other Christopher Nolan movies?
Okay, so I can give you my Christopher Nolan movie ranking before I watch Tenet because I don't know if I've actually decided where I'm ranking Tenet. So, number 5 was The Dark Knight Rises. Number 4 was Batman Begins. Number 3 was Inception. Number 2 was The Dark Knight. And number 1 was Inception. No, Memento. Number 1 was Memento.
I was going to say, you didn't like Inception as much as
No,
other
although I
people.
still ranked it 3rd.
Yeah.
So, but I liked Memento because I thought that it was, I guess maybe I like independent movies better.
I saw this meme about, it was Thanos with the 6 Infinity Stones, and it's all 6 Christopher Nolan movies, and one of them was like about power, the other one was about the mind, the other one was about the soul, the other one was about time, the other one was about whatever the
That's
other 2
true. He
Infinity
does
Stones
kind
are.
of.
He focuses in on like one part of human essence and really like diverges into it. This one was time, obviously.
Memento would have been Mind, I believe.
Yeah, memory and mind.
And that movie, yeah, I liked it because it was so small scale.
Yeah.
And I felt like when good directors are limited in their budget, they often like really use their creativity, and that with Memento.
Well, I'd say Inception is more mind.
Memento, I don't know, but Memento is confusing because of the way it's shot.
Yeah.
So like it's shot in 2 different ways, and then they meet in the middle. So the middle of the movie is like the end of the movie instead of. So they're like Christopher Nolan's always been like this. Like his movies have always been confusing. Although the Batman movies tend to be a little bit more straightforward because they're
Yeah.
Batman movies and they're supposed to be like big blockbuster.
And honestly, that and Inception are what he's known for, and Interstellar sometimes. But
Yeah, I mean, there's The Prestige, which I haven't watched, that I've heard is good. There's Insomnia, I think, which has who's that? Al Pacino is in that one.
Yeah.
But you're right; those are his famous ones.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because Christopher Nolan. Oh, I forget what I was gonna say. Anyway.
yeah, but anyway, I would say if I had to put this Tenet movie on the Christopher Nolan scale, I think I would put it at the top.
Really?
I do.
Wow.
I think it, like you said, it comes down to personal preference. And I really like Inception. I am totally a bandwagon on that. And I really like Interstellar because I'm also a bandwagon on that. And I really like the Batman movies, once again, because I'm a bandwagon. But this movie, for me, is probably more towards my preference of time travel and like confusing plots that are consistent mostly, as to the extent that they can be. And I really liked like just how the characters went, and it was like less of a. I mean, Christopher Nolan isn't known for having romance in his movies because he literally kills off Batman's girlfriend in the second movie.
It's
like,
not his strength.
Yeah, definitely not. And and that's not my personal preference either. So I kind of like that. So I think Tenet was.
The man who likes hitman rom-coms.
Yeah, because I like it when the hitman reaches the romantic partners and kills them.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm not sadistic. I just like this movie a lot, just because the style was good. Maybe I'll change my mind later. Maybe I'm just on a little Tenet high, you know. But no, I think the symbolism in this movie with like time travel going reverse and forwards,
Yeah.
and there were so many cool creative scenes that are so confusing that I'm gonna have to watch again. But I really liked it.
Yeah, I think this one would be my 3rd favorite. I think The Dark Knight and Memento would be better. Memento just because I feel like after I watched Memento, it like really changed my. It was a very impactful movie on like in getting me into movies, and The Dark Knight because it was another impactful movie on getting me into movies, but kind of because of Heath Ledger. And even if the rest of that movie, The Dark Knight, isn't as good as the parts with the Joker in it, but Still a great movie.
And it's not saying I don't like. I love The Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight and
Dark
the
Knight
first
Rises
one.
is kind of messy.
Whatever, but I love all three of those, and I love Inception and Interstellar, and but I think for personal preference, I would pick Tenet.
That's cool. We
Yeah.
got a new favorite.
Yeah.
All right, but now we got to pick a new movie. So next week we don't have anything on the schedule because we are going to randomly select a movie from the list of movies that are
Which
on.
once again we've gotten a lot of community interaction, which I like.
Yeah, and we keep getting more, and we love getting more suggestions. Again, if your movies are on popular streaming services like Netflix and Hulu, or Disney Plus, or Apple TV, they
Or
would be
Peacock or HBO Max,
not-
etc.
Yeah, etc., etc. We are more likely to watch them than if they are not available there. So, with that, we're going to click our randomizer button and see what movie comes up. All right. Bad Boys it is!
Bad Boys, sweet.
Oh, and this is great because we have a listener who kept begging me for Bad Boys to be an episode.
Okay,
So,
I'm happy. I'm
yeah,
excited. I haven't
this is
seen
a
it.
good one.
You've seen it?
I've seen Bad Boys, and it
Okay.
is it's not a bad movie. It's a good movie.
Good Boys. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Well, with that, we let's plug our Twitter and our Instagram, who
So-
are being run by two other people at the moment.
Yes, so we have two new people. Kenzie is running our Twitter, and Emma, my girlfriend, is running the Instagram.
Girlfriend
I will
reveal.
also still be on both of them. So like if it was something that specifically I needed to answer, I'll still be answering like listener stuff. So don't worry. But they're just gonna be running some of like the posting stuff and so forth. And so the Twitter, actually the name is changed now. So instead of at the Movie Vault, instead of what it was, it's at Movie Vault Pod. At Movie Vault Pod for Twitter. Mm-hmm. And then for Instagram, it's at the Movie Vault Pod. And our email again is themovievaultpod@gmail.com. So that's where you can send in suggestions. You can, if you want to send in suggestions on Twitter, you can hashtag MovieVaultPod, and we will be looking for that. And you can do it on Twitter, but you don't have to. You can just DM us or send us an email.
I think we're
Any
up to
avenue.
I think we're up to 3 followers on Twitter.
Yes.
Thank you to the other 2 followers.
Thank you. Twitter is definitely the easiest social media to grow.
It would be 4 if we could follow ourselves, honestly.
That's true. Actually, I don't think I've actually followed from my account on Twitter because I don't really use my account on Twitter.
Yeah. You
So-
should go on your account on Twitter and follow us soon.
Yeah, I will do that.
I'm going
and
to
we'll
create
have
9
4
accounts on Twitter just to follow
Yeah.
the Movie Vault.
And then we'll have 9 more followers, and that'll be great. And you can
Yes.
send in all the movie suggestions and overload.
9
I'll be like,
different movie
"Who is
suggestions.
Zach?
So then every week we're watching a movie that I want to watch.
Who is Zach Meewald? I don't know who that is.
Or Max Zewald.
Max Ewald. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, Ben.
It is now time to close the vault.
Pew, 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 pew.
Hey, backwards Zach.
Hey, backwards Ben.
I just brought this in because this is actually the start of the episode, not the end.
Is it? So really, the Movie Vault wasn't opened at the end; it was closed.
Yes, but the future self of your past came to the present so that it could tell you to reclose the vault at this time.
So in a way, we're always simultaneously closing and opening the vault.
The vault is never opened but also never closed.
Wow, paradox.
We call that the Vaultadox.
Nice.